Alright, so moving right along in the second part, we're going to get started with the snow. And this part is probably going to be the longest one out of all of them, just simply because we're going to be concentrating mostly on applying the snow using the Magic Snow plugin to just about everything in this scene. And that's going to take a while to do that. So before we get to that part, I quickly want to go over something that I accidentally did in the first part, and I kind of went over something and selected an option that I should not have selected. So in the first part we were talking about the lighting, and if we click on the V-Ray light tag here for our area light, go over here to the area light tab, we use the dome feature here for the area light type, and we use the HDR image here for the texture. And there's this little option here called Spherical Dome. Now, with this option turned on, the HDR image is not going to show up in the viewport when you render. Or if you render it to a picture viewer, that image is not going to show up. And if you remember in the first part, I was trying to determine where the sun was. That way I can rotate this light around, because remember we rotated it negative 145 degrees. So what we need to do is take the Spherical Dome option here and just turn it off. And now, and I'll tell you what, let me just kind of pan down here. Now when we render a little portion here, and I'll just render the upper portion of the sky. Remember in the first part it was black, but now you can actually see the sky image coming through. So now we're getting the sky image coming through versus having it all black. Now, you can enable this option back again, this Spherical Dome option, but you're going to need to place a large sphere or some type of back card in the background in order to place your sky texture on. Otherwise, it's just going to be black. So in this case, I'm not worried about doing that. I'm just going to leave this option off, because this sky image, or this HDR image, you can see that it is 7,000 pixels wide. So this is going to be plenty of resolution to use for the backdrop. Alright, so now let's go ahead and get started with covering everything in snow. So once you have the Magic Snow plugin installed to your plugin directory, just like every other plugin, you can get to it by going Plugins, Magic Snow, or in this case, I've got mine docked over here in a little palette. So I'm just going to click that, and what it's going to do is it's going to give us a Magic Snow object, and it's going to be a rectangular, or actually a square-shaped emitter. So I'm just going to pull that up, and I'll pan over there to it, and you can see what it looks like. It's just going to be a regular square-shaped emitter. Now the way this works is that you have to tell the Magic Snow plugin what objects you want the snow to collect on. So if we go over here to the Magic Snow tab, we have some different settings here. The quality is at 90%. Now that usually works fairly well, but I often find myself taking the quality up to maybe 95%, maybe 97 at most, because if you go to 100%, it's just going to add a lot of unnecessary geometry. So try to keep it somewhere between 90 and 95 maybe. If you want to go a little further, okay, that's fine. But just keep that in mind. Snow size, this is going to determine the actual size of the snow when it starts to collect. 7 is the default setting. Usually I find myself bringing this down depending on what I want the snow to look like and exactly what object it's going to be collecting on. Of course, the X and Y size, that's just for the size of the emitter. The birth rate, of course, will give you more particles in the scene, so if I hit play and play through this, you can see we've got some particles that are starting to fall. And if I take the birth rate and go up to maybe something like 100, hit play again, now you can see we've got a whole lot more. The speed setting here does exactly what the name says. If we take this value down, the snow is going to fall slower, or if we take this up to a high value, let's just say maybe 555, hit play again, you can see just how much faster it's falling. So that's a little fast at the moment, so I'm just going to take that to maybe 150. And the wind speed, if we take the wind up, you can see what it's doing. It's just kind of adding some wind and turbulence here and some different direction to these particles. All right, now we have this field here, this link box for collision. And this is where you need to place your polygon objects that are going to be collecting the snow. So what you would do is you would take your objects that you want the snow to collect on, and you can just take them and drop them down here in this collision link box. Now we have the option for self-collision, and what that means is once the snow starts to pile up on top of an object, you're going to start to get the snow colliding with itself. So let me just give you a little example here. I'm just going to create a new file, and I'm going to create a sphere. And for me personally, I don't care too much for this gray bluish color. That's the default color for these objects here. I usually like to change that to the 80% gray. I just kind of have a personal preference for that. So I'm going to change that over to that, and I'm going to grab the plugin again, and I'm going to take the sphere, I'm going to drop it down into here, and I'm going to need to take the speed up, so 155, and let's take the birth rate up to 55. Now you don't actually have to follow along with this, I'm just going to show you what the self-collision does. So here we have self-collision, it's turned off, and I'm going to need to take timeline a little further. Hit play. So the snow starts to collect on top of the object. Alright, so you can see what that looks like. Looks rather smooth. Now I'm going to take and go back. This time I'm going to enable self-collision. I can hit play again. And what's going to happen is now these particles, when they come down, they're going to collide with the snow that's already there. So now you can see it looks a little more lumpy versus having the self-collision off where things were a little more smooth. So obviously if you're going to have objects that are going to be close up to the camera, you're going to need to have self-collision on in order to get the snow to have that lumpy type of look to it. Otherwise, you're going to have to resort to using some type of displacement mapping in order to get that realistic, lumpy snow type of look. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. So let's go ahead and get started by putting some snow on some of these objects. So the first thing I'm going to do is put some snow on this wall. So this is going to be the front wall here. So what we want to do is go to a top view. I'm going to take the Magic Snow plugin and I'm just going to push it over here to the wall. Now to help speed things up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the X size, or actually it's going to be the Y size in this case, and I'm just going to scale that down about right there. And we need to bring the emitter down. That way we're not sitting here all day waiting for these particles to fall and hit the wall. And then we're going to take that front wall object, which is this object here, and we're going to take it and drag it down here into the collision field. I'm going to take the quality up to 95, and then I'm going to hit play. Alright, now you can see just how quickly that built up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the speed down to maybe 100. I'm going to turn on self-collision. Alright, so I think what we need to do is we need to take the size of the snow here, and we'll just take that down one value to something like maybe 6. Alright, so maybe we'll take it down one more to a value of 5. Alright, now that don't look too bad. I think that will work for now. Alright, so now that we have the snow and it looks the way we want it, what we want to do is we want to click on the Keep the Snow button. Once you click on that, it's going to basically do the command that's called current state to object. And what that means is that it takes the object here, which is the snow that has just been formed, and it converts that over to a polygon object. So here we have the newly created object called snow. So now we can just rewind to the beginning of the timeline, and there's our snow. Now it gives you a snow texture, but since we're using V-Ray, we're going to make our own, and this is a standard C4D texture, so we really don't need that. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete that. And there's our snow. Now it's looking kind of weird, and the reason for that is because the quality of the snow, you can see what it looks like here. It's rather low poly, and it's got all these triangles and all of these weird edge loops and these cuts in here. So let's see what happens if we add a Hypernurb and drop that in. The Hypernurb, there's the Hypernurb there, so you can see just how much better that looks already. Kind of smooth things out a lot. So let's take the subdivision editor down to 1. We'll take the renderer down to 1. Alright, so I think more than likely we may need to apply the Hypernurb just to kind of help out. But for now, we'll just leave the Hypernurb turned off. Alright, so the next thing we want to do is apply some here to these plants. Now these plants are pretty easy to do this with. All you have to do is just right click on your object that was in here in the first place, which was the wall. Just right click and click remove. And we need to take this plant here, which is going to be in the greenery null, and that's the front bush. So we'll go back, drag that front bush into the link box here. And we'll take the Magic Snow plugin and just move it over top. And just kind of scale that to fit the size of the bush. Alright, so we'll go ahead and hit play. And that quickly got nasty. So let's take the snow size down to maybe 3. Alright, now the problem with this is that it's collecting too fast on the top of these leaves. But we're only getting just these little tiny blobs down here around the bottom. So let's take the emitter and let's position it maybe halfway on the plant like that, and then we'll hit play again. Alright, so once again we're getting the blob on the top, and that's not going to work. So moving the emitter down, that doesn't work very well in this case. So we're left with a couple of options on what to do concerning this little bush here. Because I would personally like to get some snow that's going to collect evenly on all the leaves, but as we just saw, it's all being piled on the top. Now, we could leave the pile of snow on the top, and then we could build some type of ice or snow shader that we can put on the leaves, and that would kind of give it the appearance of that it's got snow on it, but then we still have to deal with that big lump on the top, and I'd rather just have it evenly distributed all over. So there's one more little thing that I'm going to try to see if perhaps it will work. So I'm going to click on the front bush here. I'm going to go into polygon mode. I'm going to grab the rectangle selection and be sure that only select visible elements is disabled. I'm going to go into a front view and I'm going to select half of this bush and down towards the bottom just so we have it selected like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the split command. Now I have mine docked over here, but what you could do, I believe if you right click, you can go down to split. What that's going to do is it's going to split off the selection that we just made, but it still retains the selection from the original object. So what we need to do is just delete the original part that we selected. So now we have the front bush here with another front bush object that was created when we used the split command, but this one is now the bottom portion. So what we can do is go back to the Magic Snow, and I'm just going to get rid of that out of the link box, and this is the bottom part here, so we're going to say front bush bottom. Put that back into the collision box here, bring the emitter down, and then let's just hit play and let's see what happens. Okay, so there's a little bit of snow that's collecting on the inside, so we're going to click on keep snow, go back. Now we're going to take the top part and drag it in, hit play, Alright, so that kind of looks good. It's still a little on the big side though. So maybe what I ought to do is let's take this size down to maybe 2. Let's see what happens. Alright, so maybe that there will look okay. So we'll click Keep the Snow again. Now we have those 2 new snow objects, so we can just take the material off of them, and we'll place these 2 in the Hypernurb as well. But of course, as some of you remember from the subdivision modeling series, only the first object in the Hypernurb is affected. So that means we have to select them all. You can just hit Alt-G. That will group them in a null. Now we'll turn the Hypernurb back on, and now all of them are being affected. And there's our little collection of snow here. All right, now we have this wall here, which that's easy because you saw how I did the first one here. We also have these 3 bushes here, which I really don't need to do them at the moment because you saw how I did this one. So you're welcome to do those 3 the same way. Let's work on this table here. So we need to get the table. All right, so where is the table that's going to be under the yard null? So we have the tabletop. So we'll take the tabletop and we'll drag it in. Need to get rid of the leaves object. And while we're at it, we might as well do the chair. So we have the chair railing. Let's see, where is the chair? There it is. These 2 chairs here. So what I want to do is I want to take the Magic Snow plugin, and we can use the little selector here. So I'm going to click on the arrow, and we need to go in here and click on chair, chair frame, and this chair, and that frame there as well. And what that did was it automatically added all of those objects to the link field. So now we can take the Magic Snow plugin and move it over into position. Rather large at the moment. So we'll shrink that down. And we don't need it up that high. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and hit play. And that's collecting way too fast. So let's take the snow size down to maybe 3. And let's do self-collision. Let's turn that on. All right, so it's collecting on the table, but it's collecting a little too slowly on the chairs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the chairs and I'm just going to remove them from the link field here. Hit play again just to let it build up here on the tabletop. Hit keep the snow. And now we can take the tabletop out and we can take the chair and the frame, that chair and its frame. Now we can, let's just do these one at a time. Maybe that'll make it a little easier. All right, so we'll hit keep the snow. And we've got one more chair to do here. We'll do that one. Keep the snow. All right, so we'll just remove all of those. Take the snow objects, drag them in. Get rid of those 3 textures. And there's the snow for the chairs and the table. So obviously I'm not going to sit here for the next 2 or 3 hours and let you watch me apply snow to everything. So I think you should have the idea on how to do this. This tree over here, you can treat this tree the same way that we treated this bush here. You can just split it off into different sections using the split command and then apply the snow to that. Just take the emitter and bring it down over top of each section, apply the snow, and then that should work out pretty well for that tree. These 2 trees over here already have snow applied to them. And of course you can apply snow to the deck here on the outside. to the ground and whatnot. So one thing I quickly want to show you is a couple of things that you don't want to do when you use the Magic Snow plugin. So the first thing that you don't want to do is make it huge. So let's just say that you want to apply some snow to the ground level here. And then what we want to do is we want to drag the ground in. So one way to do that, we'll just take the Magic Snow plugin and click on the little arrow there again and just click on ground. That will add it. Hit play. Now it's already starting to slow down. The snow that's falling hasn't even touched the ground yet. And you can see that's coming to a crawl. So let's take the emitter, let's pull it down closer to the ground. Let's try it one more time. All right, so clearly you can see this is coming to a crawl, and it's taking forever to do this. So whenever you're using this emitter and you're wanting to cover the ground, don't cover the ground in large sections. What you want to do is, let's try something like maybe 300 by 300. Go back, and I'm going to take the emitter and I'm just going to start it off, let's just say right here in front of the wall. We need to take the snow size up, hit play. All right, so there's the snow starting to collect. And we'll let it play for just a few more frames here just to get some nice filling in of these little gaps that are in there. All right, so that looks pretty good. So what we want to do is click Keep the Snow, take the emitter, and you want to pull the emitter down to where the emitter, it's kind of hard to see here. Let me see if I can change the color. All right, see the emitter here. What we want to do is we want to align the emitter up where the snow stops, but we want to just overlap it just a little bit. So take the Magic Snow plugin and push it up to where it overlaps that snow. So you can see that we're overlapping it by just a little bit. Otherwise, if it's down here where it stops, you're going to get this grid pattern in your snow, and that's not going to look very realistic. So we'll hit play again. All right, now I know what you're thinking. Whoa, wait a minute, what happened? Well, that's okay. Don't worry about it. It's fine. All right, so now we can hit Keep the Snow. So we'll go over and keep the snow, back that up, and we'll take those two off. Now, if the color is red, the reason for that is because we have display color here. We'll just click off. That was just to show you the emitter position so we could see it a little better against the white background. All right, now notice that we do have a little bit of a crease running across there, but that's okay because we're going to use a tool to fix that. So what we can do is drag these two into the Hypernurb, turn that on, and to be honest, it really doesn't look all that obvious. But in the case of something that does look obvious and you want to fix it, what we could do is use the brush tool. So let's go into point mode, and let's right click and choose brush. And we can actually use the brush tool here to kind of move some of these points around. So what I want to do is I want to change the radius because it's way too big. So let's go down to something like maybe 25 and maybe 20. Okay, that's better. And we don't want to smear, because if we start to smear, look what happens. We're just smearing these points all over the place, and that doesn't look very good at all. So we don't want to use the mode smear. So what we want to do is let's try surface. Let's see what happens with surface, and let's just kind of move across here. And what we did was basically we just kind of made a mountain range there, something weird looking. So that's not going to work either. what we want to do is we want to reverse the strength. So it's at 100. So let's put that at negative 100. But remember, if we go negative 100, it's just going to have the same effect. It's just going to be opposite. And I don't want those impressions in the snow to be that deep. So let's go with something like maybe negative 25. So we can just kind of come in here and just kind of move around. Now, if you go over a section and then you go back to it, it's going to just make it go down deeper. So there's the section that we just did. Right there you can see there's a hole there. So when you're using the brush tool, if you go over a section, notice how it's moving it, but if you go back over it, it's just going to continue to move that section down. So in order to blend these two together, what we could do is we could take these two snow objects and just use the connect object plus delete command. Then what we could do is go up here to where the crease is at, and then we could just come in here and maybe make some random brush strokes through there. And then it kind of gets blended together a little better. Of course, you can take the strength of the brush and go back in the plus direction. So let's pull up the brush again. And let's go plus 35. And then run it down through there. And now you can see it's starting to blend together a little bit better. So that just really depends on how well you want it to blend together. But when using the Magic Snow plugin, I found that it is just much more efficient, it's faster, and you'll get it done a whole lot quicker if you lay the snow down in small patches. And then you can just use the brush tool just to kind of blend it all together. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting here forever waiting for the snow to collect if you try to take the size of the emitter up to make a huge section rather than these little small patches. Alright, so that's how you do that. There's one other thing I quickly want to show you. This is concerning the ground. This ground here, you can see that I just kind of scaled it out a little bit here, just kind of extruded that outer lip just because it was rather small. But if you want to make your own custom ground object for this, you can. And using the brush tool, I just want to quickly show you what you can do with the brush tool. So I'm just going to make a new scene file. And again, you don't have to follow along with this part. You can just watch if you like. And this is going to be to show you how you can create a custom landscape. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a plane. And this plane, I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger than what it is. So maybe 800 by 800. Now, this is where you need to be careful with this because your polygon count is quickly going to go through the roof if you don't watch this. So I'm going to take the width and the height segments. I'm going to go up with those to about 130 by 130. All right, need to make that editable. Go into point mode, grab the brush tool, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the fall off set to bell, strength at, let's do something like maybe negative 75, and the mode I'm going to set to surface. I'm going to go to a top view, and what I want to do is I want to make some type of valley. So I'm just going to bring this radius down to 65. I'm going to start up here. Now be sure that you don't have any points selected because only the points that are selected will be affected. However, if no points are selected, then everything is going to be affected by the brush tool. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm just going to create maybe some type of weird pattern here and then end it out through this corner. And I think I should probably take the plane and move it up above the grid so we can see it a little better. And there you go. There's our little snake valley that we just created. So what if you want to do more? Okay, well, maybe we want to have some really sharp looking jagged maybe holes up here in the top or something. So we'll go back to a top view, and we need to go back to point mode. We'll get the brush tool, and the fall off here, I'm going to change that to constant. The radius I'm going to bring down to maybe 15. I'm going to start over here, and I'm just going to kind of go through here and just make some zigzag lines. Just make some channels in between here. All right, and by doing that, now you can see what we've created. Now that's looking a little nasty. And the reason why it's looking nasty is because we changed the fall off from bell, which was a gradual type of fall off, to constant, which means everything that we click is just going to be a constant jagged adjustment made to those points. So let's go back and let's change the brush tool to something in the plus direction. So we'll do 100 on the strength. And we'll go back up here to the top view. And I'm just going to make a little circle there. And this really isn't really anything specific. I'm just kind of making some random patterns in here just to show you what you can do when using the brush tool. So as you can see, instead of using the landscape object, where is that? There it is. Instead of using the landscaped object or some type of displacement map, you can just use the brush tool in order to create your own custom landscape. But just be aware that in order to get very nice results, you're going to need to take the polygon count up, and depending on how big your scene is, you're quickly going to get a very high polygon count with that. Alright, so that's how you do the ground and the custom terrains. So for right now, I'm just going to leave all of this where it's at because everything's going to be covered here with these little snow patches. So I think that about wraps up this part, because I don't think you guys want to sit here and watch me for the next 2 or 3 hours go through all of these objects and one by one build snow on top of them. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to coat everything in snow, including the ground object here. And then once that's all finished, then we'll come back and get started with the next part.